The Sabres had a preseason game featuring a lot of their prospects and AHL guys. Briefly, we'll get into what happened in Pittsburgh. Also, the Sabres land in Europe. Their first practice already underway and has taken place there. And a mailbag, all coming up today on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
You're Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. As always, as we approach hockey season, I mean, we're just barely over a week away from the start of the regular season for the Buffalo Sabres. And, you know, with football season going on right now, a lot of Buffalo sports fans are ingrained into that. Always appreciate you making Locked On Sabres one of your first listens every day. Sneaky Joe DiBiase on today's show. You can check us out on our YouTube channel. You can follow me on Twitter if you're looking for me on social media at Sneaky Joe Sports, or if you want to become a part of our Locked On Sabres text club, we will have a mailbag today with some of the biggest questions from our listeners on our text club. If you want to sign up, if you're not already with us, join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres is the place to do that. Got a fun show planned for you today. I think I got a take on the mural. I've got some thoughts on the Sabres win in Pittsburgh. I don't even know, again, it's gross calling it the Sabres. It's the Amerks. It's the Amerks wearing Sabre uniforms. Whatever, that's fine, right? But they get the win against a Penguins team that was not loaded with NHL players, but had a couple. So we'll get into that. A couple of players that stood out for me. I got some thoughts on what Consta Hellenis and Noah Ostlund looked like, and those are the two guys I went into that game saying I was watching out for. And some mailbag questions, a lot pertaining to the season. Some roster questions as well. So a lot to get to on today's show. The Sabres are in Europe. They have landed early this morning in Europe. They are in Munich. They will be in Munich for a few days, and they will play Red Bull Munich on Friday, which I think is probably going to be a cool atmosphere for an exhibition game, kind of a preseason game for the Sabres, but exhibition game. Some atmosphere, I think. Like, I just guessing that Red Bull Munich is going to have fans there. A lot of fans there. Most NHL preseason games, I mean, a Penguins game last night for the Sabres, there was 100, 300 people in the building, maybe. But this Munich game, I think you're going to have an atmosphere. I think you're going to have a full crowd. It's just a thought. You're going to have bigger ice as well, and we'll see what kind of differences that presents. A team that plays a different league. Maybe you get a different style of game. I don't know. Also cool for JJ Peterka. Peterka, that's kind of another reason why I wonder if they're going to have a loaded crowd, because their guy is coming back to play them. Imagine you're a Red Bull Munich fan all your life, which, by the way, Peterka was. He talked about that this morning. You live in Germany, you grow up in Munich, you love hockey. You love that team. And your team grows this incredible young player who's from there, plays for the team, is great for the team. I don't know if they won championships or whatever while Peterka was there. I'm sure they were pretty good, though. And he is so good, he gets to go overseas and live out his dream of playing in the NHL. And he does that. And then you get a chance to have him back to play for his current team against your team. I think that would be probably a pretty cool thing if I was from Munich. Peterka is talking that way. Peterka is like, this is my squad. Like, I grew up rooting for this team. I was in the stands as a kid watching this team before I even got the chance to play for them, before I ever knew I'd play for them. So I feel like it's probably pretty special for Peterka as well. He, by the way, he's got a job this week. He's playing host, right? Like, Dan Rosen, who's covering this run for the Sabres for NHL.com, he's following the team. He tweeted out this morning that Peterka had to several times go over to the bench because German journalists were trying to interview the Sabres coaching staff, none of which speak German. So Peterka had to kind of leave what he was doing on the ice to go play translator for everybody. And then he's going to be showing his teammates around in Munich, right? So Peterka's got the post-playing job, I think, over the next couple of days, which is why kind of weird that NHL.com, who did this blog, they're doing this live blog from Owen Power. Owen Power is writing like blog posts about their trip. And I don't know why they didn't pick Peterka. Maybe it's because Peterka's already got so much on his plate. Because Power, no offense to Owen Power, I like the player a lot, and I don't need him to be this big, giant personality. Man, that dude is dry, though. Like, he just, he doesn't, when he's on podcasts or in this blog, it's like, we landed in the morning. Our flight is 8 hours. I don't have trouble sleeping over 8 hours. Like, just, it's not really much to it. Again, fine. Everybody be your own guy. But Power doing the follow along the Sabres at NHL.com as they go to Europe was an interesting choice, maybe to say the least. Practice, by the way, this morning in Munich, the one big update that we really have for you is Rasmus Dahlin is out of a non-contact uniform. Biggest news that we had as they get ready for Red Bull Munich. Dahlin out of a non-contact uniform. One take I want to get to before we talk Sabres and Penguins and then get to our mailbag. We talked about the mural yesterday. We showed you the mural that the Sabres are going to be putting up in Alumni Plaza. They announced that yesterday, and it's awesome. It is awesome. 27 players, the colors. It's going to be a huge upgrade, I think, over what they had there before. And yesterday I was trying to think of, did they really forget anybody? And you could look into like the all-time games list, all-time points, and say, well, who's the top guy they left out? Derek Roy is the guy statistically that was probably the best player they left out on the all-time records numbers. And like, they didn't need to put Derek Roy on there. You don't need to put Derek Roy on there. But there was another player I thought of and went, oh yeah, that guy probably should be on there. It's maybe the only player I've really thought so far, like, that guy should be on there. Everybody else, I think, is like, okay, Marty Biron should be on the mural. Right? Shouldn't Marty be on the mural? And I know Marty, so, a little bit. I'm not, like, best friends with Marty. He's the nicest guy in the world, so, like, everyone loves him. Everyone that works with him loves him. Fans love him, right? And have since he was a player. He was my brother's favorite player growing up as a kid. So Marty, who has been here largely, well, I guess, he had a 7-year stretch in his playing career where he was not here. But he debuted for the Sabres in 1995. He was on this team in some capacity from 1995 to 2007. He only played 9 seasons. He was in Rochester for a couple of those. But 95 to 2007, he was here a long time. And you look at his numbers and how they stack up. There were 4 goalies on the Sabres all-time list. I don't mind that. I don't mind him not being one of the 4. Maybe find a spot for a 5th goaltender if you can swing it. Because Don Edwards, great goaltender in the 80s, split a Vezina trophy when the Vezina was a little bit different. Tom Barrasso won the Vezina trophy as a rookie and had a great 6-year stretch with the Buffalo Sabres. So I don't need to take those 2 off. I would add Marty. Marty's 4th all-time for the Sabres in games played among goaltenders. He is 4th all-time for the Sabres in wins. And like save percentage, .909 save percentage, that's not bad at all, especially, him playing in the mid-90s. Well, I guess he only had a few games in the mid-90s. But a .909 save percentage is not bad for Marty. He had a winning record with the Buffalo Sabres. He still works for the team. He's still here. He does mean a lot to Sabre fans, I think. He would have been the one guy I would have said, all right, maybe you put him on. I don't think it's like the worst thing in the world that they left him out, but you kind of would have been doing him a solid, I think. And it would have been deserved. I don't think it would have been that crazy. It wouldn't have been like, oh, you only put Marty on there because he works for you now. I don't think that would have been that at all. Rob Ray's on there, right? And nobody's saying that about Rob Ray. So Marty Biron would have been the one guy that I would have added to the list. I think his numbers deserve it, and I think what he means to Sabre fans and how well liked he is by Sabre fans deserves it also. Time out here. When we come back, the Sabres had a preseason game last night. A lot of Amerks prospects as well. Tell you what I saw and who stood out coming up on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented on the show by FanDuel Sportsbook. All right, you still got a week or so, but get in there. Check out your future bets. I'm looking right now at the Sabres over 87.5 points. I'm looking at the Sabres to make the playoffs as a bet. You could be looking at Sabres to win the division. I'm not. That's a long shot bet, but that's up there for you. Hockey props, they're coming up. And, of course, football is in full swing right now, going into week 4. You got a big Bills-Ravens game right now. The big Bills are an underdog. You know, number one in a lot of power rankings. If you're feeling confident, go check them out. They're an underdog at Baltimore next week. And NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view some live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Check it out at FanDuel.com. Sneaky Joe DiBiase back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. The Sabres are in Europe. Their B team is still here. They were in Pittsburgh last night, and they will go on to play in Ottawa on Thursday, and then Columbus on Saturday. Apologies and correction. Although ESPN, when you pull up the Sabres preseason schedule, lists ESPN Plus next to the game, you actually can't watch that game on ESPN Plus. I don't know why. Preseason TV rules, no clue. The Wild West. All I know is Sabres.com is going to have these games. MSG will have a couple of them, but Sabres.com. So it says ESPN Plus next to this Ottawa game on Thursday. I might not want to trust that. Anyways, the Sabres were in Pittsburgh, played the Penguins. The Penguins, by the way, had some NHLers. They might have done the Sabres a solid by not throwing out Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin against the Amerks, because then it could have got really ugly. But Noel Acciari was playing in that game for Pittsburgh. He's an NHLer. Kevin Hayes played in that game. Rutger McGrody, Anthony Bolivier, Sebastian Aho, the other one, Ryan Graves, Alex Nedeljkovic in goal. Again, you had some of the lower-level Penguin players that were out there, and then mixed in with their AHL guys, too. The Sabres, though, had straight AHL guys, straight prospects, and that was it. 3-2 win. A wagon. The Sabres are a preseason wagon. They are 3-0 in the preseason. In this game, they were outshot 29-27. I thought the Penguins were the more lively team. I thought the Penguins were the better possession team. The Sabres did a good job, though, I thought, for maybe the difference there was in talent in the game. And I thought overall, team-wise, they did pretty well. They got some nice goaltending from their prospect, Scott Ratzlav, who was a 5th-round pick a couple of years ago. And right now, behind Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and Devin Levi, you look at your young goalies in the organization, he's probably 3rd. They drafted Topias Leninen, who was a 2nd-round pick a couple years ago, but he's had injuries and hasn't really been developing. Ratzlav has been the one. He was on the Team Canada, I think, preliminary roster for Team Canada's World Junior team, so he made 10 saves on 10 shots. He looked pretty good. I didn't think have any like crazy great saves, but definitely stood in there and played well at the end of that game. There were 2 Sabres that I want to point to that stood out in this game, and then I want to talk about the 2 Sabres that I wanted to see if they stood out, and they didn't. And we'll start there. Konsta Helenius, 1st-round pick of the Sabres this year, and Noah Ostlund, 1st-round pick of the Sabres 2 years ago, who was a part of the Jack Eichel trade. Neither one of them, in my opinion, really flashed. I don't also want to say either of them played particularly poorly. I just wasn't wowed by either. I brought up yesterday, like, hey, last year, Zach Benson got a shot to play with the NHL guys and earned his right onto the team. Helenius doesn't have that luxury because they never practiced together. And I did have the question yesterday, like, you don't know that he's not Zach Benson 2.0 because he didn't have a chance to prove that he could be Zach Benson 2.0 right out of the gates, make the team. Preseason game number 1, nothing really I saw that makes me think that, they really missed out on seeing him with the other NHL guys. Nothing. Like, he was fine. again, there was he threw his body around, I thought, a lot, actually, for a player of his age. He did decent on faceoffs, 4 of 11. He could be worse. Wasn't great, obviously. 36% is not very good. He wasn't last on the team, though. Aslan actually was at 16% on the night. And then there was another Sabre with 31%. But Hellenis, the one mistake he had, and this is something he's supposed to be good at, and I'm not worried about it, but he was supposed to tie up a guy in front of the net, Kevin Hayes, actually, NHL player who scored the first Penguins goal. And he was Hellenis's man really in front of the net. Like he kind of got caught puck watching. I think you want him tying that guy up. So one mistake by the rookie in that game against NHLer. So not the worst thing in the world. And then Aslan just kind of faded into the background. He did lead the Sabres in shots. Actually second on the team in shots with 3. But not a ton to look for from either player. I'd like to see more from them in the next 3 games. The 2 Sabres that I did like what I saw. One was just a goal, but maybe a little more than that. Anton Wahlberg is kind of impressive. He was a second-round pick of the Sabres last year, high second-round pick, big body. I've compared him to, like, hey, maybe this could be a Paul Gaustad-like player in the future. Maybe more. Like, there's a little bit of skill there. We'll see if that ever translates to the NHL. He did score a power play goal in this game, and it was a nice little finish. Kind of hanging out around the net. The Sabres win a board battle. They get it out to the front, which is the style Lindy Ruff wants to play. The puck kind of squirts out to Wahlberg, and bam, he's got it off his stick in the back of the net. Like, doesn't hesitate, gets the puck into the back of the net. So Wahlberg's all-around game looks pretty decent, and he finds the back of the net, so a nice night for him. The number one guy, though, that stood out for me, who led the Sabres in ice time. And keep in mind, yes, these are all AHL guys and prospects. There are veterans in here. Like, Brett Murray, at this point, is a veteran pro hockey player. He's been with Rochester for 4 or 5 years now. Ryan Johnson is been a pro hockey player for a couple of years now and played 4 years of college. Like, he's an older prospect. Ethan Prow. I found out Jack Rathbone the other day has played in the NHL. Like, you've got some veterans in here. And the guy that played the most ice time was Nikita Novikov on the blue line. A prospect I get questions about a lot because 6th-round pick. Part of the reason, remember, his background was he probably would have been more like a 2nd-round pick by a lot of accounts, but those in the NHL didn't know if he was going to come from Russia. They thought he might stay there, and that had his draft status drop. But then he came over. So now you kind of got like another 2nd-round prospect that might be developing over here. And what I saw from Nikita Novikov is a physical player, maybe a little too physical. He took a penalty on one spot for that. Actually, he took 2 penalties on the night, but a physical player, likes throwing his weight around at 6'3", 200 pounds. I think he still has some growing to do when it comes to muscle and whatnot, but 21 years old, he's still got time to do that. And more, I kind of like these puck skills that he's got. Even not counting the goal, I know I picked the 2 Sabres that scored as the 2 players that stood out. I did like both of their all-around games, though, outside of the goal. Novikov, I do think, jumps up and plays more than you might think for what he was supposed to be. He's supposed to be more of like a stay-at-home defenseman, I thought. The goal he scores, he jumps up in the play. He's coming in an odd-man rush. Confident, wicked wrister over Alex Nedeljkovic's shoulder, an NHL goaltender. Top corner, bar in. Pretty nice shot for the defenseman. Like a really nice shot for him. And again, he was their number 1 defenseman on the night. I liked him. And more, I'm wondering about Novikov being a legitimate full-time NHL player. And last night, I think Sabre fans were wondering, like, oh, who's this Novikov guy, for those that at least watched the game. Those are the big things that jumped out to me. Thursday night against Ottawa, the next game. When we come back, mailbag edition. We've got some good questions from our listeners that we'll run through when we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, presented here on the show by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better. When it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search. Match with Indeed. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now. Support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Final segment here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Let's get into our mailbag segment on today's show. Start doing this weekly. Got some good questions rolling in from our listeners on our Locked On Sabres text line. If you want to get in on our text line, best way to do that, only way to do that is go onto the internet, and then it's texting us from there on. Join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres where you can hit the subscribe button there. All right. First question, actually, this is more of a comment that I want to get to before I actually even ask for mailbag questions. One listener, real optimistic Buffalo sports fan. I like this. Just wanted to read it. As a Buffalo sports fan, I just feel something different about this year. Like, the Bills seem to have a less selfish team. So do the Sabres, obviously, and the Bills have been contenders for 5 years where the Sabres haven't. But something just feels special this year. I think the Sabres can get a wild card and 97 points, and the Bills get to the AFC Championship game at least. As a Buffalo sports fan, I can't think of a time without more excitement in town with the Bills 3-0 and Lindy back in town. I do think, not to fly in the face of your optimism, 1 year ago at this time, the Bills were still a contender, and there was more optimism about the Sabres. So 1 year ago, you probably could have said the same thing, and I probably did. That doesn't mean that you're going to be wrong, though. 97 points is definitely within the range of outcomes. And the Bills are going to make the playoffs. So it really could be the first year since 1999, 25 years ago, that both the Sabres and Bills make the playoffs in the same season. Isn't it amazing that it's not happened in 25 years where both teams have made the playoffs in the same year? And maybe this will be the year for that. There's a good chance of it. Bills basically already clinched at 3-0. Knock on wood, I didn't just jinx them. Anyways, all right, let's get to some of our mailbag questions on the day. First up, do you think the Sabres will deploy a 2-defenseman power play at any point? Good question. They have not been practicing with 2 defensemen on a power play unit, but last year, they did use a power play under Don Granato at the end of the season where Bo Byram was on the number 1 unit with Rasmus Dahlin. So the way they're practicing makes me think, no, they're not going to do it at the start of the year, but I can definitely see a point in the year where they try Bo Byram on the top unit with Dahlin and leave Power for the second unit. By the way, I'm writing that down to think about that for our next show. I have not been paying attention to who their number 2 power play defenseman has been, because we know Dahlin's going to be the number 1. Power and Byram are worthy of being on the second power play unit, and I haven't seen actually who's been that number 2 guy. So good question, and I think at some point during the year you are going to see it. They have too many good offensive defensemen, I think, to avoid it. All right, next question. How does Ruff rotate the 14 forwards? So I think you're going to see right now only one spot rotating. And I still think it's going to be the Jordan Greenway spot. I think they're going to leave that fourth line together, Lafferty, Obi, Kubel, and Mallenstein. I don't think those guys are rotating out. Right now, I do not. So I think you're going to have a slow rotation. I don't think it's going to be 2 at a time. I think it's going to be 1 at a time, because I don't think McLeod's ever coming out. I don't think that Benson's ever coming out. For right now, Zucker, I don't think is coming out, but maybe Zucker, who was a healthy scratch last year at times in Arizona, could get to a point where he's a part of that, but not yet. I'm not ready to say that yet. And you hope that we never get to that point with him. So right now it's Greenway, Krebs, Kulik are the 3 names that I think are all rotating with each other. And maybe Kulik, once they come back, it's sent to Rochester, and it's just a Greenway and Krebs rotation. Next, what are your predictions for Devin Levi this year? Can he win the Calder Trophy? So I actually looked this up because I didn't know. I thought, maybe he is eligible. He just misses. He just misses. You can't play more than 25 games in a year, in the previous year. And Levi played 21 last year. But the other qualification is you can't have played more than 6 games in both of the previous 2 seasons. So you can't go 7 games, and then be eligible for the Calder. You can go 5 games and 7 games and be eligible for the Calder, but not more than 6 in the previous 2. Levi played 7 games in his first season. 1 start makes him ineligible for the Calder. So no. And my prediction for him is that he's going to play 30 to 35 games, and he's going to do really well doing it. I will also just throw out the hypothetical. I don't think this is likely, but I do think it's possible that Luukkonen regresses a little bit. Not crazy. He doesn't go back to what he was before, but we see a little bit of Luukkonen regression, and Levi pops. And I do think there is an outcome where Levi gets to a 50-50 split. But he's going to need 2 things to happen. He's going to need Luukkonen to not play as well, which nobody wants to see have happen. And he's going to have to thrive. But I do think that's out there. I do think it's possible Levi earns his way into a 50-50 split at some point during the season. And another question about goaltending that kind of goes into that. Another listener, do you think the Sabres will carry 3 goalies into the season, or will somebody be sent down or waived? My prediction right now is they're going to go. They're in Europe. They have their 3 goalies. They're allowed extra roster spots while they're there. When they come back, I think James Reimer is going to be waived or sent down, however it works. I should figure out actually how that does work, because with a veteran player like that, he might actually have to be waived. I think he might clear waivers, though, and to me, Reimer is going to be sent down. I don't think they're sending Levi back. It doesn't make sense. I think they're too smart to do it. They're too smart to do that. And I don't think they want 3 goalies again. So I'm going to say no, they're not going to carry 3 goalies. Next, what's the ceiling for Owen Power? And where's Matt Barnaby on the mural? Barnaby, well-liked player, but he's not getting on that mural. What's the ceiling for Owen Power? His ceiling's Victor Hedman. I will continue to say it. His ceiling is Victor Hedman. It's how he plays. It's the style he plays, the size, the draft status, the start of their careers. It all looks pretty much the same. But you just don't know when it's going to happen. Hedman, it didn't happen till, was it year 4 for Victor Hedman, where he really started to pop in Tampa Bay? Hedman, who was the number 2 overall pick in 2009. It was year 5, his age 23 season. Year 5 was the year that he really took off. That was the first year also that he got Norris votes, where he finished 9th in Norris voting. So, that's the guy. That's the comp. That's the style of play. That's the size comparison. That's the draft comparison. And that's, again, the slow start to their careers while still looking pretty good. Hedman, that's and it could happen any year. He scored 2 goals so far in the preseason. It could happen any year for Owen Power where he just shows up and he looks that good. Next up, which current Amerk do you hope gets a call-up this season? For me, it's either Novikov or Wahlberg. 2 guys are focused on for the preseason game. No, those are good answers. Novikov is definitely that answer for me. I like the way you phrased the question. Who I hope gets called up is Oslin or Hellenis. And I'll go, you want one name? I'll give you Hellenis. I hope it's Hellenis, because if he gets called up during the year because of his age, that means to me he's been so good they can't deny him. Any of the other guys, it's, they're doing pretty well down there, they get a call up. That could even be Noah Oslin. That could be anybody. I think they're only calling Hellenis up if he looks dominant, if he looks amazing. And that's why I'd say he'd be my answer. If he gets a call up, I hope he gets called up this year, because that means that he looks like a star early on in his career. Another question from another listener that kind of goes in line with that. I got 2 more I want to get to. First call up after Kulich. Who's going to impress in the remaining preseason games? Who is the first call up after Kulich? Maybe it depends on the type of player that goes out. My short list, though, right now would probably be Brett Murray, because of his long, if it's a bottom 6 guy, Brett Murray, size, physicality. Lindy likes those guys in the bottom 6. And I'll still say Isak Rozan. He's not my favorite player at this point. I don't know what his prospects are, but it is worth pointing out he did get called up last year. Might have forgot about that. He played 7 games for the Sabres last year. He got called up, and Kulich got sent back. Rosen stayed and played, I think it was like 5 more games, 6 more games than Kulich did. I mean, he only averaged 8 minutes a night doing it, but maybe worth pointing out that he did last longer here than Kulich did. So I think Rosen's probably still someone they would call up. And finally, the big question, the monkey in the room, is the final question on our mailbag today. Our last texter that asks a question, he even starts it with Sigh, ... Is this the year we break the drought? Sadly, if you pinned me down, made me put money on it right now, took my heart out of it, and coldly examined the team and the conference and tried to really nail down, all right, are they going to do it this year? And you pinned me down and said, you got to answer yes or no. Right now, I'm answering no. I don't think they're going to get in. I think they are lacking when it comes to top-end goal scoring compared to the other teams in the conference. I think they're going to be competitive. I think they're going to probably be in it right to the very end. And I think it's very, very possible that they do get in. But right now, I would bet no. I would bet that they don't get in. It's sometimes it's a math problem, right? For them, like, there's just so little room to get in. They play in a loaded division where you feel like 4 of the spots are already taken. And if that's true, if 4 spots are already taken, look at your math problem. You're left battling with like 10 other teams for 1 spot, 1 wildcard spot. And that's really hard. It's really hard to overcome that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe one of those 4 teams will drop out, but it hasn't happened yet. All right, if you got a mailbag question, you want to get it in, we'll keep rolling through them on our coming shows. So be sure to text it in if you got one. That is going to do it, though, for us today here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We will talk to you tomorrow. Tomorrow, we'll talk more about the Sabres and Senators game that's upcoming, but a little bit more of a preview on Friday's game. I think Friday's kind of cool for the Sabres, and we'll have some more big picture type conversation tomorrow as we're going to be in between games on that show. So that'll do it for us today here on the Locked On Sabres podcast at Sneaky Joe Sports. You want to follow me on Twitter. Be sure to make your next listen, by the way, if you're looking for more of a league-wide perspective, Locked On NHL. The guys checking out all teams in the league. And then if you are looking for some Bills talk, Joe Marino of the Locked On Bills podcast. Check him out there. Thanks for listening to Locked On Sabres podcast, making us your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.